Sleep is one of science's great mysteries. It seems a strange animal behavior, because when we sleep, we lose awareness, control, and self-protection. In a dangerous world, that can be a problem. How do animals of vastly different shapes, sizes, and lifestyles manage? We're only just beginning to recognize how other creatures sleep. But understanding how might unlock the answer to the deeper question: why? Sleep is one of the most common behaviors in the animal kingdom, and one of the least understood. There seems to be an endless variety of styles and strategies for getting 40 winks. Across the globe, scientists are trying to solve this riddle.
Sleep is a really odd phenomenon, steeped in mystery.
Sleep is a very interesting mystery that we're all kind of attracted to in some way, shape, or form.
Schlaf ist ein großes Geheimnis.
Sleep is a great mystery, because every night we disappear into a room that we can't really touch on properly.
We are realizing that there's a lot more that we don't understand at the moment.
Cutting-edge technology is just beginning to reveal the sleeping habits of vastly different organisms. Much of what we know about sleep comes from studying ourselves. So perhaps a good place to start is with a close relative. At the Indianapolis Zoo in Indiana, researchers have been studying the intelligence and learning behavior of orangutans for years. The zoo offers a unique opportunity to observe the animals day and night. Dr. David Sampson of the University of Toronto studies the sleeping habits of primates. He's looking to answer some very fundamental questions. Does a good night's sleep improve brain performance for orangutans, as it does for us? And what do their sleep habits tell us about the evolution of the primate brain?
This was an evolutionary idea that when that first proto-ape was negotiating its environment in the canopy, and it started pulling back branches in a tree to feed, it at one point decided to sleep there. And because it could sleep reclined, there were, according to the hypothesis, there were cognitive benefits, because the individuals that were doing that could go into deeper sleep because they were relaxed and insouciant, and they were in a less vulnerable, more comfortable position. The orangs are essentially just an extended human. They have identical sleep phasing, and the cycle's identical.
Modern orangutans seem to build their nests just like the first primates are likely to have done. David Sampson is hoping to establish that the ability to improve the quality of their own sleep gives animals like orangutans the cognitive edge over others.
Orangutans are like the kings of bed building, even in the wild. If it's raining, they'll actually build a nest on top, and it provides an ad hoc shelter. And like no other ape does this, they really care about the comfort of their environment, even more than chimps and gorillas and bonobos.
In the wild, orangutans build their nests 30 meters high in the tree canopy, choosing a different site every night. So for a sleep scientist like David, a zoo is the only practical place to study this behavior in detail. And it's possible to control crucial factors like the kind of materials available to build a nest. It should give an indication if nest quality affects sleep quality.
The idea was to create a sleeping platform comfort index. Orang 1 takes this sheet, also takes this comforter, and this pillow. I'm gonna score that as a 3. If they just took a sheet, I would score that as a 1.
At the end of each day, the orangutans are given a selection of straw, blankets, and other materials to build beds. Some nights the choice is better than others.
AZ, he was by far the most proficient and the most skilled at building a bed. He would sometimes take up to 55 minutes to build and manufacture a sleeping platform, and he was meticulous. He would take a sheet and typically put it over a big pile of straw, and he would test out this sheet multiple times, multiple angles. He would get in, and if there was just any straw poking him in any way that he didn't like, he would just start from scratch all over again. If I were to have one ape on the planet build me a bed, it would be AZ.
Night vision cameras give David Samson the chance to monitor the orangutan sleep closely throughout the night, while he must stay awake. He can clearly observe different sleep phases, known also in humans as REM and non-REM sleep.
This is AZ in a beautiful state of REM, and you can tell because the eyes are moving rapidly and there's a little bit of a roll in the back of the eyes and the back of the head. And then there's this classic behavioral signature of being in REM of a phasic muscle twitch. And this is the brainstem keeping the body from enacting what it is experiencing in its REM state.
REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, remains one of science's great mysteries. Studies of human brains have shown that the brain is highly active, almost as if it were awake. As with AZ, the body falls into a state of sleep paralysis, while the eyes move constantly and dreams are vivid. It's thought to be important for the processing of emotions and information, as well as learning motor skills. But hypotheses are still being tested.
So here I can decipher from Lucy that, in fact, she's in a state of non-REM. You can see it's almost like her diaphragm is like a metronome. This video is in 8 times speed because it's much easier to score that way. And so I would score this as in the column of non-REM. And so I would score that out, and then I would look at that relative to the proportion of data that I get through the rest of the night.
This non-REM sleep state is how primates like us spend most of our time asleep. It's when our brain cells fire in regular bursts that wash over the brain, much like a Mexican wave spreads through a football stadium. It's totally different from an awake brain. Human studies have shown that in our sleep, events are replayed, relinked, and memories are consolidated, while other connections are pruned.
So the mystery that we were trying to solve was twofold. One, does sleep physiology change when you change the sleep comfort in the orangutan's environment? And we established that. So there was a clear relationship between the quality of sleep and the duration of sleep when we gave them these really high quality materials. The next step, that really critical point on cognition, was when they have access to these really high quality sleeping materials, do they think better the next day by performing with greater accuracy on those cognitive tasks?
Zoo president Dr. Rob Shoemaker oversees the cognitive tests. In this case, he's checking AZ's performance after a good night's sleep.
I look at 2 things on this task for him. One is how many correct answers overall, just percentages. And then how many, hit your send key, good. How many correct in a row? So statistically, the magic number for us is 8. If he can have 8 or more correct in a row, that's about impossible to do by luck. Hit your senki. Good. That was just 10 in a row. So that's it, bud. You're totally out. You're totally done. You're totally done. So that's it. There's no more. You've eaten everything. You named everything and you ate everything. We're done. That's it. I'm sorry.
So it's actually precisely that. Nights where they had access to the higher quality sleeping materials, their accuracy in the touch screen, so their ability to complete the task successfully increased. They went from about a C, C+ to a B in their scores by an improvement by about like 6 or 7 percentage points.
So sleep quality clearly plays a crucial role in how well the brain functions. Primates with their highly developed brains need enough good, undisturbed sleep to be able to perform demanding tasks like recalling memories and solving complex problems. It makes sense that our close relatives need sleep for the same reasons we do. But does it still hold true for animals that aren't like primates at all, especially those with a very different kind of intelligence? In Wisconsin, Dr. Barrett Klein is on the trail of creatures in which even just identifying sleep is a challenge.
Looking at sleep in vertebrates is one thing. Looking at sleep in invertebrates, those animals without backbones, like insects, the most diverse lineage of animals on the planet, can be really tricky with respect to sleep. There are easily well over 1 million described insects on the planet. How many have been described with respect to sleep? A pathetic sliver relative to vertebrates.
Dr. Klein focuses his attention on honeybees. Although their brains are comparatively simple, they share a collective intelligence. But what does a sleeping bee even look like?
So you really want to look for a relatively immobile bee, drooping in the direction of gravity, with this discontinuous ventilation of the third segment of the body.
The surprising revelation is they sleep a lot. Younger worker bees sleep tucked head first in brood cells. Altogether, it's a whopping 9 to 10 hours a day. Foragers get a little less, but still notch up an impressive 7 hours of shut-eye, mostly at night. Given their reputation as busy bees dedicated solely to the colony, not the individual, why bother sleeping at all?
Worker bees could be cleaning cells. They could be tending brood. They could be tending the queen. They could be storing food, packing pollen. They could be guard bees. They could be funeral bees carrying out the dead. They could be building wax comb from exuded wax flakes from their abdomens. They could be doing all these things, and yet each and every bee seems to fall asleep at times. And so it suggests that there are some functional benefits of sleep.
For sleep to be of use to bees, it would have to benefit the entire colony, where success is based on shared information and communication.
One way to address why we sleep is to look at consequences when we lack sleep. If I were to restrict honeybees of sleep, would there be a detriment, a failure, an imprecision, a cost as it relates to their inability to effectively or precisely communicate?
Barrett Klein wants to know what happens to a bee's brain performance when sleep is restricted. But how do you restrict sleep in a bee without being on constant call to tap it when it dozes off? And even more so, how do you keep track of that bee in a colony of thousands?
This one. Let's see if this one wiggles.
In Barrett's lab, a weird contraption keeps the bees in his observation hive on their toes.
And I call it the insaminator. And it has banks of magnets that run along a track on either side of an observation hive.
To keep some bees awake, he attaches tiny magnets to their backs. As the inseminator passes over them, they're jostled a little, enough to stop them dropping off for a well-deserved nap.
And this is the beauty of looking behaviorally at a social group of organisms like honeybees, that you can individually paint mark or label with numbers. And then all of a sudden you have a face, a name, a label, and you can identify with the individuals within those large societies.
It's not without risks.
Never been stung by any insect ever.
I don't believe it. We told this story 2 days ago.
There you go.
Barrett concentrates on individual forager bees. They're the ones tasked with finding sources of pollen and, crucially, telling their nestmates where to find it. They give directions by means of a waggle dance. It gives precise information about the direction and distance to food sources, water, or new nest site locations. It's at the heart of how bee colonies succeed and survive. But how do the bees perform this dance after a restless night of bad sleep?
They still waggle danced, but fewer waggle dances, less precise dances directionally, and fewer waggle runs or increments or iterations of that dance, of that precise dance. So overall, there was less of it there. So they were advertising far less than dancers that weren't sleep restricted. The information, you could argue, was sloppier when it was delivered to followers of that dance. Now, the followers, in turn, following a less precise dance, ended up switching to other dancers.
So the amount of sleep a bee gets ultimately affects her ability to do her job well. Even in these insects, whose brains are entirely different from those of primates, sleep decisively affects their cognitive performance.
There is so much untapped potential to explore sleep in terms of its function, its mechanisms, whether or not it's shared across organisms due to ancestry or convergence. With such an array of mysteries looming, my handful of studies with honeybees is barely scratching any kind of surface of what sleep means and what the value of sleep is across the most diverse lineage of animals, the insects, that can, by extension, tell us what sleep is in animals, including ourselves.
So if a tiny bee needs plenty of sleep to get her message across, surely the largest land mammals on Earth will need at least as much to keep their legendary memories in tip-top shape. The Mabula Game Reserve in Limpopo, South Africa. This is where Professor Paul Manger of the University of Witwatersrand wants to show what happens when wild elephants go to sleep.
In the past, when we've looked at animals sleeping, like the elephant, we've generally looked at these animals in a zoo setting, where we can control things and see what's happening. So it's really important to take what we've observed in the zoos and see if that's happening in the natural environment and how sleep is actually changing.
But in this huge area, catching an animal while it's sleeping is easier said than done, even an animal as big as an elephant. By day, they're conspicuous, appearing more hungry than tired. Perhaps they sleep at night. Finding elephants in the dark is tricky. let alone finding one asleep. Even in the wee small hours, this herd is wide awake and still eating. Do they ever sleep? Paul Manga needs to change strategy. At the crack of dawn, a helicopter lifts off, carrying a vet equipped with a tranquilizer dart gun. The plan is to attach a device to one of the elephants that will monitor it 24/7. In this thicket, it's tough to get a good clean shot, even from the air. Paul and a specialist team try to follow the helicopter from the ground. Once the elephant is down, they have to act quickly to keep the time under anesthetic to a bare minimum. Finally, the elephants are on open ground. If a giant like this falls in the wrong position, it could crush its own lungs. The team works like a well-oiled machine, first performing a quick health check. Then they attach a key bit of technology, a GPS collar with built-in gyroscope. It will keep track of the elephant's movements and register whether it's standing up or lying down. Meanwhile, Paul Manga makes a small incision in the trunk and inserts a motion detector chip. These two devices will allow Paul to recognize exactly when and how it sleeps. If the ever-active trunk stops moving, but the animal is still standing, that indicates a state of non-REM sleep, which it can do on its feet. If the gyroscope collar shows the elephant lying down, that indicates REM sleep when its muscles are paralyzed and it has no choice but to lie down. Paul's studies show a perplexing result. Elephants in the wild hardly sleep at all. At best, just a couple of hours a night. And they rarely seem to lie down, so they must be getting very little REM sleep, as little as once every 9 days.
This might be related to the need for the elephant to get a lot of food into its body. The elephants eat anywhere between 100 and 500 kilograms of food each day, depending on the size of the elephant. So it takes a lot of time to get all that food into your body, so you need a lot of time to actually be awake. And it seems that the time that they go to sleep is really strongly related to the ambient air temperature and the relative humidity. Those seem to be factors that are controlling the timing of sleep in elephants.
Have elephants found a way to get by on minimal sleep? Or is food simply a greater priority than shut-eye? The findings raise more questions, but one thing seems clear. There is no one-size-fits-all explanation of sleep. Different animals have found different ways of getting sleep in tune with the challenges they face. For elephants, it's the time-consuming need to get enough food. But there are many others that have to deal with an entirely different set of lifestyle challenges. For some, sleep isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially fatal. Dr. Adhil Bhagwandin of the University of Cape Town in South Africa has investigated the sleeping behavior of fur seals. Here on the South African coast, they're a part of the local landscape.
Good news.
Yeah, lekker, man.
Lekker.
Yeah, jump on board.
All right, thanks, mate.
To observe them in a wild, undisturbed setting, Adhil makes his way to a seal colony on nearby Diker Island. This is where he hopes to find them engaging in some surprising sleep habits.
Oh, this looks great. Some of them look like they're resting. It's hard to tell that whether they're actually sleeping at the moment on the island, but I really like to see them is in the water.
We have to get you in the water as soon as possible.
Excellent.
It would be easy to imagine that they forego sleep entirely while at sea. The dangers are just too great.
Because they are mammals, they need to breathe. And in the water, that would put them at risk for drowning.
But studies like Adhil's reveal that they do sleep at sea. The telltale sign is what's known as the sailboat position, with one flipper sticking vertically out of the water. Despite appearances, drowning is of no concern for the seals.
So what they've evolved is a way to counteract that. And one of the ways they do that is by keeping one half of the brain awake and the other half asleep. And then they swap between the hemispheres.
It's known as unihemispheric sleep. Half the brain sleeps, while the other stays awake to surface and breathe. But Adhil and his colleagues wanted to know, do they sleep the same way in the water and on land? To find out, they placed electrodes on the brains of a few test subjects. They found that seals can change their sleep style. While in the water, they suppress their REM sleep phases, much like elephants do, and they sleep only with half their brain at a time. But unlike elephants, when fur seals sleep on solid ground, they switch strategy and sleep with the whole brain, following a more familiar cycle of REM and non-REM sleep.
Because these animals live in both the water and on land, they have evolved different sleep patterns when they're in each environment. And that's really interesting for us because REM is what we know in most animals is a very important part of the sleep cycle. So an animal that actively suppresses it is very curious for us. And why do they suppress it? What does it mean? How can they go for such extended periods without this REM sleep? Does it have any negative influences on their lifestyle or how long they live for? Also, what's very interesting about them is that when they come back to the land, they don't tend to catch up that REM sleep that they lost in the water. Most mammals, if you deprive them of sleep, they will become very agitated. They will try to catch up that sleep that they lost. Fur seals don't seem to do that.
Adhil and his colleagues have a theory about why seals don't need to catch up on the REM sleep they missed while at sea. Perhaps they simply don't need it, because unihemispheric sleep in the water might perform a similar function to REM sleep on land.
In water, we tend to lose heat very quickly, something like 16 times quicker than you do in air. And that's not a very good position to be in, particularly for your brain.
Keeping half their brain awake and active may be what keeps their brains from becoming dangerously cool. On land, where the seals sleep with their whole brains, a different system takes over to heat the brain, REM sleep.
So what we think one of the functions of REM sleep is to heat the brain in a sense. Kind of like when you're cold and you shiver, that shivering response generates heat. We're thinking that REM sleep has one of those functions of heating the brain, but in animals that live in the water, they seem to have this inbuilt system already that's keeping the brain warm. So the need for REM sleep may be altered in that situation.
This gets to the very heart of what REM sleep is and does. Part of REM's function could simply be keeping the brain warm whenever both hemispheres are asleep, one that isn't needed at sea when half the brain stays awake at all times. Sleep itself isn't negotiable, it's essential. That much is certain. It's the way animals sleep that appears quite flexible. But surely there must be limits. It's one thing to sleep while floating. What about flying? In southern Germany, Dr. Niels Rattenborg and Martina Oltrogger of the Max Planck Institute in Seewiesen are trying to decode the mysteries of bird sleep on the shores of Lake Ammersee. These birds are Canada geese. When their striking white eyelids are closed, the researchers know they're asleep. And they employ a similar technique to the fur seals.
One interesting thing that birds can do is they can sleep unihemispherically, that is, with one half of their brain at a time. And when they do this, they only close one eye. This ability to sleep unihemispherically seems to have evolved to reconcile the conflict animals face with needing to be awake and watching for predators and also getting some sleep.
This tranquil scene of snoozing geese is misleading. There are plenty of intruders here, intent on disturbing their cozy nap. But the birds are prepared. Some guards keep one eye and its associated brain hemisphere awake. Others are free to sleep with both halves of their brain, knowing the guards will sound the alarm. No dog is going to get the better of this flock.
They seem to have this ability to make a decision. Okay, I'm at the edge of the group. There's danger off to this side. I'm going to sleep with that eye open and the other eye closed.
There are fewer disruptions out on the lake. But sleeping on the water has its own hazards. Yet none of the birds are drifting aimlessly into danger. Is unihemispheric sleep their answer, or have they mastered something even more remarkable? To find out, Niels has devised a large-scale experiment in a floating aviary.
Here we have geese living in an aviary equipped with 20 cameras that will allow us to see if and when they're sleeping while swimming. The cameras will allow us to see both eyes at the same time, something which we can't do in the wild. With the cameras, we can see both eyes at the same time, but it's also important to measure what the legs are doing. And we do this by putting little motion sensors on each leg, and then we can pair up the motion sensor recordings to the video recordings and firmly establish that they are paddling while sleeping. And I think he's paddling. Let's see. There, yeah, see the water was disturbed? He's paddling and sleeping. It's cool, it's working. This phenomena of sleeping while swimming has never been described before, so we're quite excited.
Even more surprising, many of the paddling geese were sleeping with both sides of their brains, just like they did on land. This points directly to an even more intriguing revelation. Like many birds, geese migrate on the wing, covering great distances without landing. Niels is certain. His experiments on the water indicate that they can do the same while flying.
If they can sleep while actively paddling their feet, it's reasonable to think that these birds that flap their wings continuously can also sleep while doing this. Most people expected, and I did it as well, that they would sleep unihemispherically, one half of the brain at a time. We didn't expect that they could also sleep with both halves of the brain at the same time without dropping from the sky.
It seems that, when necessary, geese can choose to sleep with just half a brain, but they don't need to. They can likely keep flying while fully asleep. Studies like this are still in their infancy. Most often, scientists must recognize sleep by observing its outward signs. What brain activity actually looks like during sleep remains a mystery with most animals. The techniques are simply too elaborate for an unwilling subject. But there are some flamboyant creatures that allow us to witness what otherwise goes unseen. At the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology in Japan, Dr. Teresa Iglesias studies the naptime antics of an ancient species that goes right back to the earliest times of evolution. Cuttlefish.
So what's cool about cuttlefish and studying sleep in the cuttlefish is that you're basically getting a view of brain activity on their skin.
Little sacs of pigment in their skin are hardwired to the brain. Like the illusionists of the animal world, cuttlefish instantly change the color and texture of their skin for camouflage, as a distraction, to communicate, or to kill. They seem to throw caution to the wind when they're asleep. Even when highly vulnerable and unconscious while asleep, they let colors flash across their skin.
So this active sleep-like display is quite interesting because it seems like it would just give their position away. It seems like an extra risky state to be in addition to just being asleep, then you're actually advertising, hey, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And that seems extra risky, which really drives home the notion that sleep is very important. It's essential to an organism's well-being.
When cuttlefish flash colors and change skin textures in their sleep, it must be related to avid brain activity, indicating an active sleep phase like that witnessed in other animals.
That matches what we expect in quiet sleep and active sleep in mammals, birds, and reptiles. The similarity is just so exciting because it doesn't matter whether there's a single origin or sleep evolved multiple times. For either one of those questions, this is a very fascinating similarity across very distantly related organisms.
And since cuttlefish ancestors have been around for some 500 million years, this striking similarity in sleep behavior of vastly different animal species suggests that sleep has been around since the earliest days of multicellular life on Earth. Teresa Iglesias wants to know just how far these surprising similarities go. How great are the parallels in young animals, even embryos? Does it extend into their early developmental phases?
One of the questions that I'm tackling right now is how much sleep happens in the egg versus what I see in the hatchlings and in the adults. What's known for mammals and birds is that young animals tend to sleep more. Particularly, they have more active sleep. So they have a lot more REM sleep than an animal that's mature. So one of the questions I have is, well, if this is sleep, and if it's similar to mammals and birds, then we would expect to see more active sleep in the developing embryos than you see in an adult. And preliminarily, what I'm seeing is that there seems to be more active sleep in these embryos.
Turns out, these boneless and ancient creatures are much more like us than we might think.
The skin patterns in the cuttlefish may be indicative of similar brainwave patterns that match what's happening in humans. It could suggest that sleep evolved from a shared ancestor through cephalopods, through insects, through reptiles, birds, and mammals, and we all just have changed the way that the sleep architecture looks based on our ecology, based on our physiology. Or it could be that it did evolve independently, but that those characteristics are so important to solving the problem, that's why those similarities exist. It screams at the necessity or the importance of sleep and the importance of sleep having specific characteristics. So it really is getting us tantalizingly close to understanding the function of sleep.
In the multifaceted riddle of sleep, the great question remains: why? What is the ultimate purpose of an activity so time-consuming and potentially dangerous? That's what neuroscientist Dr. Albrecht Forster wants to find out by studying a species even more ancient than cuttlefish. Because the older and the simpler an animal, the more clearly the core function of sleep can be identified. Albrecht Forster has been keeping up to speed with Californian sea hares, marine snails at home in the Pacific Ocean along the west coast of the United States. They have a simple nervous system and just 20,000 nerve cells. Their modest living requirements? A little marine vegetation to chew on, and they too sleep. In Albrecht Forster's laboratory, they can continue their unassuming lifestyle unperturbed, but under constant observation. Turns out, Californian sea hares follow the same rhythm as us. Active during the day, they sleep at night.
I turned to the snail because I was looking for an animal with fewer nerve cells, that was well researched in terms of its learning abilities and memory, and I wanted to know, is sleep also central for the formation of memories here?
So even sea hares have the capacity to learn, and just like all other animals, they need to sleep. How do we know when a snail is sleeping? They follow the same sleep criteria. They're immobile, less responsive, but can be woken up again. Albrecht Forster decided on a bizarre undertaking: to teach sea slugs something and watch them sleep. Teaching a primitive mollusk anything at all seems weird. But food is a great motivator, especially when offered as delicious bite-sized morsels. But then, the enticing leaves are wrapped in an impenetrable netting, impossible for the sea hares to reach. Their attempts to eat the tempting food inside are futile. But the learning process is clear. After several goes, the sea hares turn away. Soon, they learn to recognize and ignore the inedible offering.
To begin with, the animals chew on the seagrass for about half an hour. And when I let them sleep after this learning event, they work it out much more quickly the next day. They only try for a few minutes and then try to find more easily accessible seagrass.
This time, the snails face a restless night. And Albrecht Forster also has to forgo his nighttime routine. He interferes every time a sea hare appears to get comfortable enough to doze off. Not even the chance for a quick snooze, but he allows others a full night's sleep. The question is, will there be a difference in the sea hare's feeding lessons the next day, depending on how much sleep they got?
Am nächsten Tag war es dann so, dass die Tiere, die schlafen durften.
So the next day, the animals that were allowed to sleep, the black group, realized much more quickly that they wouldn't be able to get through the plastic. The animals that were kept awake, in white, took around twice as long to work out that they couldn't get through. So they had hardly any learning effect. And we can still see this difference in the learning effect 34 hours after both groups had the chance to sleep. The experiences we've lived through during the day are triggered again when we sleep. They're replayed. It results in a consolidation and cross-linking of the learned information. And I think that's also the reason why we lose consciousness, because during this revision of the day's events, we're in a really unstable condition. And if you'd suddenly got new inputs for your memory, the previously learned information would be messed up.
It may not seem like a humble sea hare would have many life lessons to learn, but learning when it's worth investing time and energy and when it isn't, that can be a life or death issue. So, sleep appears to be the indispensable core of learning, even for animals with extremely simple nervous systems. And in that, even sea snails have more in common with us than we might like to think.
Snails have a nervous system, just like us. They learn, and they really use the same neurotransmitters and genes too. They're activated when they learn something. So the same learning processes are active in snails as in humans. And that's why we can transfer what we have found out about sleep in snails to humans too. And that's when we can see that sleep is one of the most fundamental functions an organism can have.
So sleep appears to have many faces, yet it has also been a part of life since the earliest days of evolution. Every animal has found a way to adapt its sleeping behavior to its specific living conditions. But none of the creatures that have evolved across the millennia appears to have given up on sleep altogether. Could there be a single factor at the center of this riddle? A force that regulates the lives of all organisms on Earth, one that has remained a constant since the beginning. There is a rhythm all life must follow, that of the planet as it spins on its axis every 24 hours. It's likely that this perpetual rhythm of light and dark has affected life from the start. Even if some animals have decided to stay awake at night, sleep they must. Even organisms that lack a central nervous system altogether adhere to the change of day and night as much as intelligent life. Scientists have found that even trees move their branches in time with this cosmic dance. Whatever sleep really is, it is at the very core of life, because life without sleep seems to be impossible. Perhaps sleep was there first as the original state of life, and being awake is only its interlude.
I wanna fall asleep.